The Boss Mom podcast is a supportive space for mothers, whether expecting, new, or seasoned, wearing multiple hats, corporate babes, entrepreneurs, or serial workers, to come together, uplift each other, and discuss our challenges and celebrate our wins. With that being said, all right, Boss Moms, let the movement begin. Welcome back to the Boss Mom podcast with your host, Ashley White. Thank you again, ladies, for joining me on another episode. Today, I want to discuss the misconceptions of miscarriages. So I know this is a sensitive topic. However, I feel like it's definitely necessary to bring forth with light because so many females do go through miscarriages, unfortunately, and it's not really talked about. Like, I know most of the time, negative situations we don't want to highlight. However, I feel like it's an opportunity for discussion for the simple fact that a lot of women are not alone. And this is not the end all be all to motherhood. And so I wanted to just take the time to acknowledge, the situation, but also highlight a success story. So I do have a lovely guest joining me today. Another soror of mine. I know y'all probably like, dang, she only gonna invite Deltas on her show? No, of course not. But my soror definitely has a great story to share. So I definitely feel like you all should hear it. And her name is Miss Andrea Wilson. And I'm going to give her the opportunity to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea. As my soror said, I did experience a miscarriage at the age of, I think it was 23, getting ready to be 24. It kind of started, we were on a cruise and I was supposed to get my period the same day we were leaving for the cruise. And I was like, oh my God, like this would be the time I get my cycle. Like I'm getting ready to go on vacation, haven't been on vacation forever. So I was like too pissed. So I'm just waiting and waiting because my tracker was like, oh, it's going to come on that Thursday. We left that Thursday to go to Miami, and then we were leaving that Friday to go on a cruise. So my tracker said, oh, it's going to come on that Thursday. And I'm like, yo, like this thing is going to ruin the whole trip. I'm not going to be able to do any of the activities that we have planned, scuba diving, water park, nothing. So I'm waiting. I feel cramps. Like I'm waiting, and I don't get it. So I'm like, okay, it's for sure going to come on tomorrow, which is going to suck because we'll actually be on the boat.
Right.
Friday comes, nothing. So I'm like, okay, I'm thinking my cycle's thrown off because we're somewhere completely different. Like my body's just in a different environment. So I'm like, okay, it's going to come on tomorrow.
Right.
Nothing. Still cramping. I'm like, yo, like, I'm not complaining because I'm like, thanks
exactly.
God.
I'm on vacation.
Like, I'm like, God, you looking out because
right.
That's expensive. So Sunday comes, we're still, on the cruise, but we're headed back to Miami. Still nothing. So I'm like, okay, for sure. By the time we get back on Monday, it'll be on. Mm-hmm. Never came. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give it like a week, give my body time to regulate again. Still never came on. So I was like, okay, like I talked to my boyfriend. I'm like, babe, I think I should take a pregnancy test. And before this happened, like I always used to be like, I'm pregnant. Like I feel like I'm pregnant. Like I always like
seriously, for real.
Yes. Every cycle, I'm like, yo, like where's my period? Like I'm pregnant. And it comes on like 2 days later. And he's always like, you're tripping, like you just you always say this every period is coming, whatever. So he thought the same thing this time. He's like, yo, you're tripping. Like it's going to come on. Like just calm down. And I'm like, okay, no. Still another week, never came. So we went to the store and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely buying a pregnancy test. Went to the store and we bought the pregnancy test. And I remember we took it, I believe it was a Friday night or early Saturday morning. Cause it was early Saturday morning because he was like, you should take it in the morning, like your first pee. That's usually like when the results are going to be the most accurate. So I was like, okay. So I took the test and it showed up positive. And I just remember feeling like, I wasn't excited because it wasn't something that was necessarily planned, but I wasn't upset. Like I was like, it was a weird feeling. I just felt weird. Like I was like, okay, like this is actually happening. So the first thing I'm thinking of is how the hell am I going to tell my parents? Like that's what I want to, like, how am I going to tell them? Like, cause this is like, you know, I just graduated college, like that. It was a year, that was that December that was coming up. Because this was taking place in like November. So that next month would have been a year that I had graduated from college. And I'm like, how am I going to tell my parents? Like, what are they going to say? Like, I wasn't thinking about nothing. Like, he was excited. He was crying. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, yo, I'm about to get in trouble. Like, not even in trouble because at this point, like, we're grown, but still, you know, like.
No, I definitely understand.
Yeah, like, they're going to be upset. Like, they'd be like, what's your plan? You guys aren't married. Like, you know, so I was definitely more nervous about that. So the next day, or that day, because it was early Saturday morning, I want to say like 4 or 5 a.m. So he went to work, and I remember being there at his house, and I just felt like really crampy, like super, super crampy. And I'm like, okay, this is normal, because by this time, every time I thought I was pregnant, I was always looking on Google for symptoms and early signs.
Every time.
And let me just say that Google, like, is not always accurate. Like, some of the stuff that's on there is true, but for the most part, like, everybody's body is different. So in the beginning, you'll definitely feel different symptoms than somebody else may. So I was just very crampy, and I'm looking at Google, and Google is saying, oh, that's normal. You're supposed to cramp. Like, you know, so I'm like, okay, you know.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm not thinking anything.
Another thing going, okay.
Exactly. So I'm like, everything's going good. Like, I'm pregnant. So later that day, like, the cramps are just like, they're not excruciating, but like they're uncomfortable because I'm trying to sleep, and like I'm just tossing and turning, and I'm like, dang, like this is a lot. So then, like, not long after, my back started hurting, and I'm like, okay, like, you know, this is normal, because I looked it up on Google. Google say your back supposed to hurt. So I'm like, okay, you know, I'm good. So that later that day, I ended up going out, like to a store or something, and I just remember barely being able to walk. Like, my back was like on fire, and I'm like, if this is what it's like to be pregnant, I can't be pregnant, because I know, you know, I'm no more than like a month, if that. So I'm like, I can't go through this for 9 months. Like, this is crazy, because, you know, like, from what I've seen, most women like do talk about back pain, stuff like that, but it's later on in the pregnancy. It's not supposed to be happening in the beginning. So the next day, I woke up and I seen a little bit of spotting, and I'm like, okay, you know, this is normal. Google says I'm supposed to do this. So I get home, because I was going back and forth from Orlando to where my parents live in Melbourne every weekend. Sometimes he'd come to Melbourne, sometimes I go to Orlando. So I went back to Melbourne early that Monday morning before I went to go to work. And I was like, my mom and my dad were both there. And that was weird, because my dad's usually gone early by the time I get back. So I'm like, this is the moment to tell them. I'm going to tell them. Right. I was like, I can't do it. I was like, I can't do it. Yeah, I can't do it. Like, I cannot. So my dad left, and something just kept telling me, tell my mom, just tell her. So I told my mom, like, you know, so I took a pregnancy test, and I'm pregnant. And I just remember her being kind of like, she wasn't upset, but she was like, you know, like the whole mom spiel, whatever the case may be. And so I told her, I'm like, well, you know, I've been cramping and stuff. So, you know, like, I don't know if that's normal, whatever. And she's like, what do you mean you've been cramping? It's like, I've been cramping, a little bit of spotting. And so she's like, that doesn't sound like anything good. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm thinking she's just being negative because she don't want me to be pregnant. Right. So I start crying, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it doesn't sound normal. Like, what do you mean a miscarriage? Like, why would you even say that? My mom has been through a miscarriage, though, between me and my sister, so she knows. But in that moment, I was like, why would you say that? Like, why would you say it's a miscarriage? Like, I'm 23 years old. Like, that's not something that happens to 23-year-olds, you know? And that was my misconception about miscarriages. So she's like, I really think that we need to go to urgent care just to have them check you out. And I'm like, Mom, it's not that serious. I'm going to go to work. Like, I can't miss work. Like, I'm just over it at this point. Because I'm like, you know, what do you mean? It's supposed to be a happy moment. Exactly. You know, like... Exactly. So I'm like, what do you mean? So I just took her advice, and I listened to her. She took me to urgent care. So as we're on our way to urgent care, my mom decides to call my dad. He doesn't know anything. So she
Right.
decides that this is the perfect time to let him know, hey, I'm not going to work today. I'm on my way to take Andrea to urgent care because we think she's having a miscarriage. So she skips over the part that I could be
Hey, she's pregnant.
right, and it's going south. So
Right.
my dad was like, what? Like he was like,
That's
what?
a lot at one time.
At
Like
one
you're still
time.
processing, okay, my daughter's pregnant, but having a
Exactly.
miscarriage? Like what?
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
looked at my mom. I remember just looking at my mom and I'm like, are you serious? And then I start crying more because I'm like,
Right.
oh, like, this is not going how I'm picturing it to go. So we get to the urgent care. And I just remember being at urgent care and I just remember like trying so hard to fight back tears in front of the people that were going to check me in because I just was like, what is going on? Like, because my mom is explaining the symptoms to the nurse at the front, and she's like, okay, yeah, that does sound like that. But, as she's saying that, and I'm processing, I'm like, no, like, this is not, no, this can't be happening to me. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's not, no, like, I'm gonna be positive. So I instantly start crying because I'm just like, this is just too much. So the nurse went on to tell my mom that they don't have the proper equipment to be able to do the ultrasound that I needed for them to be able to see what was going on. Yeah. At the time, I just assumed it was going to be an ultrasound that, where they put the thing on your body or on your tummy and they, just like what you see when you look at videos or pictures of people doing ultrasounds. So at the time, I had no clue like what I was in for. So we leave urgent care. And she's like, you guys are going to have to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital. They checked me in. At this point, the blood was still kind of like light, but it was a little bit more. So I'm like, I'm praying and I'm like, God, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but, just help me to remain positive, regardless of what happens. We're just hoping that whatever the outcome is, this is your plan.
So you had been spotting for a couple of days at this point?
At this point, it had been 2 days. So I had started spotting that Sunday, and then this was that Monday. So I have been spotting for 2 days, yeah. And but it was still the same amount of blood. It wasn't a lot,
right?
And it was light colored. It was a pink. It wasn't a red. So that's how I was like, the symptoms didn't really seem like a miscarriage when I looked it up. It was like heavy bleeding, dark red color. So it's not that color. So I'm like, I don't think this is what's going on. So we get to the hospital and they check us in. They take me back, and so they take my vitals, and then I think they took blood. And at this point, I'm over it. Like I'm before I had my son now. Like I was super afraid of needles. Like I was never the person to go in and get a shot. Like I acted a fool, even no matter how old I was.
Right. No, I'm the same way. I'm like, I hate when they have to draw blood. I'm like,
exactly, it's too much. I'm just like, no, like y'all can't take it another way. Like,
right.
So at this point, like I just felt so numb. Like I was like, I didn't even care. So they took the blood, and then so the nurse comes in, or no, it was ultrasound tech. She comes into the room and she goes, I'm going to take you back for an ultrasound. So I'm like, okay, I'm not thinking anything of it. So we get in the room and she pulls out like this long thing. And I was like, okay, that's the ultrasound for my stomach, right? It goes on my stomach.
Right.
She's like, no, this has to go intervaginal. And I was like, huh? Like, I'm like, where is that going? Not in my intervaginal. Like that thing is huge. So she was like, yeah, like unfortunately, this is the only way because we need to be able to look at your ovaries. We need to be able to look at everything. We won't be able to see that with the regular ultrasound. And I was like, oh my God. So we're in there and she puts it in. It's so uncomfortable. She's moving it up, down, side to side, round and round for like, I mean, this was like the longest, probably 15 minutes of my life. So she sees the baby and she says, everything looks good. Like everything's okay. Like they're going to send you back and they're going to review like the ultrasound and the pictures that we've taken. And, they're probably going to put you on bed rest. You probably won't be able to go to work. So I was like, okay, everything looks good though. That's good. So we go back. The doctor talks to me and he says, we are going to put you on bed rest, but this is not saying that you won't miscarry, but you are in the phase of a threatened miscarriage. And that's what they had on my paperwork. So I'm like, okay, at this point, my boyfriend, John, he had drove down from Orlando. Like, I called him, like, you need to get to the hospital now. Like, I think I'm having a miscarriage. So he was there, whatever. He had just gotten there. So I just remember just taking all that in and just feeling like, what is going on? Like, I just remember, I remember feeling sad, but I also remember just feeling like confused. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how
many questions?
I'm like, I just found out I was pregnant 2 days ago, and now you're telling me that I'm having a miscarriage or a threatened miscarriage. So I remember my dad got home once we got back home, because I was on bed rest, so I had to stay in bed. And I remember bleeding more heavily now. I just figured it was because of the
vaginal.
Vaginal ultrasound. So I'm thinking, that was a lot of pressure. Like, that's why I'm bleeding. So at that point, the miscarriage had started, but I didn't realize it. So I remember my dad just talking to us, and it was completely opposite of the reaction I thought I was going to get. I thought he was going to be upset, but it was a very sensitive moment for everybody, like, that's a lot, for everybody. And so I just remember him just really talking to us and, saying, like, whatever God's plan is, that's what's going to happen. If you guys are having the baby, we're going to support you 100%. If you aren't having the baby, we're still going to support you 100%. Like, you just know that is not God's timing for you guys right now.
Right.
And so I just remember not wanting to hear that, but taking it in, because I'm like, I originally went from not necessarily not wanting the baby, but not being ready, to now losing
lots of emotions.
Yes. Yeah. And so we ended up, I went to sleep that night. The bleeding was still the same. Woke up the next morning, and I decided I'm going to go to work, because I just didn't want to be home. Like, I didn't want to be home. I was just, I can't. I want to go to work. I went to work, and I sat. I shouldn't have done this. My parents were like, don't go. They want you to be on bed rest. I still went. So I went, and I sat down. I work at the bank. So I was sitting down for the most part. And I remember going to the bathroom. I didn't feel any way. I felt okay. I remember going to the bathroom, and I passed, I believe that was the fetus, because it wasn't huge, but it looked weird. And I was having blood clots, but in this instance, it was a little bit different. It looked different. I just knew, like, that's what it was. And I just remember telling my manager, like, I broke down. I told her, I said, I have to go home. Like, I have to. Like, it was just too much. But I just didn't want to be home by myself, because my sister was in school. My dad and my mom were going to work. And then my boyfriend came back to Orlando because he had to work. So I was home by myself. So I'm like, I want to go to work and be around, my people. Yeah. And that was just the wrong thing to do, because I think I passed the baby the next day when I was at work. So I remember going home, and I just felt like so sad. Like, and at this time I didn't know if that's what it was or not, but I had a feeling it was. So that week, the next day, I believe, or a day after, I had a follow-up appointment with the OBGYN. And so they did another vaginal ultrasound. And I remember, like, maybe I had to wait for like 30 minutes. She came back and she talked to me, and she said the baby did not make it. And I do remember that I was like 5 weeks. So I was really early in the pregnancy. But I just remember in that moment feeling like something was wrong with me. Like, I asked her, I said, what did I do? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, was it that I was on the cruise and I was scuba diving and on these big water slides? Did I eat something that, I shouldn't have ate? I don't drink, I don't smoke. So I'm like, what did I do wrong? And she looked at me and she said, you didn't do anything wrong. And she told me, she said, this type of stuff happens, and it happens a lot more common or a lot more frequently than we know and that people talk about. And I just remember just like, I'm 23. Like, that's what I kept telling her. I said, I'm so young. Like, I thought this happens to older women, like, who are trying to have babies and they have complications. She says, no. Like, I have so many younger women, younger than you, that come in with the same complications. And we don't have enough research to know what it is. But I remember her telling me, that a lot of times what helps people get through their miscarriages is knowing that that specific fetus might have had complications that it was better for them to go ahead and pass on and be in heaven than to put that baby through whatever they might have had, like whatever complications they may have had.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling so much better hearing her say that because, and I remember my mom told me that too, but I just felt so much better hearing her say that because even though that was a lot for me, I was thinking about my unborn baby and the fact that who knows the stuff that could have happened to that baby because whatever the little, sperm in the egg, it didn't do what it was supposed to necessarily do. So it could have been missing. My baby could have been missing an eye, could have been missing an ear, could have had, like all types of genetic issues, we just don't know. Right. And I just remember feeling like I still was hurt and, sad, but I just remember feeling like this was God's plan for me. And I didn't know why at the time. I didn't know why I was going through that, but I just remember feeling like this isn't his timing. Like it'll happen when it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So.
No, I was going to say it's interesting you say that because I was actually doing my own research on miscarriages and like reading on different myths that we I don't want to say that we put in our head, but that we think surround miscarriages. I mean, like you said, instantly we're thinking something's wrong with us or what could I have done to prevent this, and even though there are, and by all means, this is not any medical diagnosis or, advice or anything like that. This is just me doing my research. But, like you said, it could have been that the baby was going to have complications. And although most times it's nothing that we've done or, anything to do with our health, there are times where it could be health related. But for the most part, it's just something that happens, and it's just crazy that there's not a lot of research around it, for us to learn about and possibly prevent, from happening. But like you said, everything has its timing. Right. Unfortunately, that's the unfortunate reality of it. And it's sad. I mean, no one wants to go through that, like, especially when it's like, okay, like you said, you were like, okay, I don't know if I'm really ready. But then you get into it, like, okay, I'm having a baby. This is exciting. You start planning and thinking of the future. And then, something like that happens. It's just so unfortunate. But I wanted to share another myth that I actually thought was quite interesting and how it kind of ties into the second half of your story that I read that, a lot of us think that we should wait several months after miscarrying before we try to conceive again. And I don't know how long you waited after, but I definitely want to get into your story of your success. Despite your miscarriage, on your beautiful blessing that came.
Thank you. So actually, in my last follow-up appointment, which was on December 30th of 2019, my doctor or the OBGYN that was doing the follow-ups with me, she told me, she said, okay, so no sex for 6 weeks. The same thing they tell you after you have your baby, no sex for 6 weeks, like they had to check my cervix. They were saying, it was a lot traumatic wise that went on vaginally. So no sex, just to be safe for 6 weeks. So I said, okay, no problem. She said they don't recommend anyone getting pregnant for the next 3 months, 3 to 6 months, I believe she told me, 3 to 6 months. Really? So she was like, just make sure that you're using protection, this and third. And I'm like, okay. In my head, I'm like, yeah, like we'll be using protection. Like I don't ever want to go, like, because I'm like, I never want to experience this again.
Right.
So I just remember like me and my boyfriend sitting down and talking, and I'm like, like, I don't think we're ready for kids yet. Like, I think we should just, get more settled, like get, more like how am I trying to say? Like, get a place, because we didn't have a place together. So get our place together. Yeah, get prepared. I want to be married, but I don't have, that wasn't one of my things where I felt like I had to be married, but I did desire to be married before I had a baby. But I just, I was like, at this point, after experiencing that, I'm like, whenever it's time for that baby, that's
right.
It's time. I will not let anybody tear me down for my decision, whatever the case may be. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so we weren't trying, but actually, so that was December 30th of 2019. I ended up finding out I was pregnant. So we had just moved into our new apartment, and it was like the first week of May, and I had not had my period for like a month. And so I'm like, it was the same thing like when I had the miscarriage. My period prior to was weird, and I guess both times I actually had a period while I was pregnant. I had just became pregnant, but I had that last period while I was pregnant both times. And so I remember that period just being weird. And I'm like, okay, I'm just not thinking anything of it. I'm like, it is what it is. Yeah. So I remember the next month not getting a cycle. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But I just remember I kept seeing ladybugs. And I'm like, this is weird. I'm like, this is really, I'm like, why do I keep seeing ladybugs? And a myth around ladybugs, also good luck, but also someone's pregnant. So I'm like, this is weird, but I'm not thinking, I don't want to talk to anybody about it. Like, I just don't want to say anything, because I'm like, at this point, if I am pregnant, I want to go about it differently this time. So I remember me and my best friend were on our way to Tampa to go see one of our other best friends. And I remember telling her, I'm like, I feel weird. Like, I think that I might be pregnant. And she was like, yo. Now, my best friend, like, she doesn't dream about, weird stuff. Like, she rarely ever has dreams. But when she has a dream that someone's pregnant, they're pregnant. So she told me, she said, that's crazy that you say that, because I meant to call you last week and tell you that I had a vivid dream that you were pregnant. And I was like, no. I'm like, no, because
like that too.
Yeah.
I'm like, you got the pregnant eye or something. Like.
Exactly. And it's weird. It's so weird, because like she dreamt that her sister was pregnant and her sister was pregnant. So I knew at that moment when she said that, I'm like,
I'm pregnant. Like,
yeah, and I didn't want to believe it, because I'm like, I was just so nervous, like having experienced that. Like, I was just like, I don't think I can go through that again.
Yeah, because you're what in May, mean you all were 5-6 months after, still, were you like still processing that situation?
Yes, yeah, and it was a lot, because I just remember seeing, like, after I left went through the miscarriage, I remember just seeing people with their babies or seeing people with kids. I just remember feeling like anywhere I went, grocery store, it didn't matter. I just remember always feeling like I was about to cry, because it wasn't that I was envious of their situation of them having a kid, because I knew that when it was my time to have a baby, I would. But it was a reminder, like, why did God choose me to go through this? I could go through anything else, but you chose for me to go through this. And I know we're not supposed to question God, but I just remember, being truthful. I remember questioning him, like, why did I have to go, through this? And so I was still healing from that, because I remember, I think I had just told my line sisters, or did I tell them? I don't remember. Some of them knew, but not all of them. And I think I had just told them not long before I was pregnant, or I told them when I was pregnant. I really can't remember. But I just remember that next week, after my best friend told me that she thought I was pregnant, I was just prolonging taking a pregnancy test, because I was so scared. Like, I was nervous to know. And I should have known, because I remember one time I was eating like a seafood boil. I love seafood boils, but I was eating them excessively. Like, I was eating them almost every week.
So that was your craving.
Yes. I wanted seafood all the time. And I remember having a soda. I usually don't drink sodas. And I remember having a Coke. And I rarely ever drink Coke. Like, if I drink a soda, I'll drink Sprite. But I remember having a Coke. And I just remember feeling so dizzy. Like, I felt completely, like, dizzy, that I had to sit down. And my mom was like, are you okay? Like, I think maybe your sugar's spiking. I just remember feeling so sick. And I was like, I don't know what this is. And this was before we had moved. I probably was like 3 weeks at the time, 2 or 3 weeks at the time. But I just remember feeling so sick. And I'm like, I don't know what the problem is. And my mom was like, you're not pregnant, are you? And I'm like, Mom, no. Like, why do you always think that that's the case?
They said use protection.
Exactly. I'm like, why would I be pregnant? Like, what are you talking? So we moved, fast forward, we moved, come back after going to Tampa with my best friend. The next week, I take a pregnancy test, and I remember taking it because I just wanted to get over with. I took it while I was here by myself. My boyfriend was at work, you know, still unpacking and stuff, and I just remember wanting to get it over with. And I'm like, I'm just going to take it. I took it, and it said positive, and I was like, maybe this isn't right.
Right.
So
we always
exactly. So I took another one, and it said positive, and I was like, okay. So, like, where do we go from here?
Right.
And that was actually the day before Mother's Day of last year. And I was like, okay, like, this is crazy. So I remember scheduling a doctor's appointment. I think this was when COVID had just kind of like spiked. And a lot of doctors were not taking new patients. Like, they didn't, if you hadn't been, and I had just moved to the Orlando area, so it wasn't like I had a doctor over here. And the last GYN that I really had, because I had just graduated like that year before, was in South Florida. And I knew that my insurance wasn't going to cover me going to her because she was all the way in South Florida and I lived in Orlando. So I remember they said they couldn't schedule me until, because they asked me when my last period was. I told them, and they said, you know, so you're probably about, I think I was like 8 weeks, I believe, or 7 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks. And they said, we can schedule you at, I think it was 12 weeks. And I remember thinking, that's too long. Like, no, like, I need to know now, you know. And I explained to them I had a miscarriage, like, prior to. I need to know. I need to make sure that everything's okay. Like, and then like, okay, you know, we can get you in sooner. So I think they got me in at 9 weeks. And I just remember going to that ultrasound, and I went by myself because they weren't allowing guests. And I just remember seeing my son, and I just remember crying. Like, I'm about to cry now because it was just so beautiful. I couldn't believe, like, because the first baby, I never really got a chance, other than, you know, like the small features. I never really got a chance to see, you know, that baby other than that one time, and I didn't really get to process it. But in this moment, just being able to see my son, and, you know, like, he looks like a baby, I was just like, wow, like, this is crazy. But I just remember going through my pregnancy, and I'd always turn on the light, no matter what, even if it was in the middle of the night and I went to the bathroom. I remember always turning on the light when I would go to the bathroom, because I'd just be scared that every time I use the bathroom, I'd wipe and I'd see blood. And it was hard, you know, like,
oh my goodness,
it was really hard. I remember going to the doctor's appointments, and every time before I went to the doctor's appointments, I would just be nervous because I always felt like something was going to go wrong. But I think by the time I seen the second ultrasound, I think I was at 20 weeks. I had gotten to a point where I had continued to pray, and I'm like, Lord, I know that you will carry me through this. Like, you won't put me through that again. And even if you do, I'm prepared this time. You know, I know that whatever is going to happen is going to be your plan. And I just remember feeling, you know, even though I would pray about it, I just remember feeling like that. And I had to get to a point where I looked on YouTube a lot, and I'd look at different vloggers that have experienced miscarriages. And I just remember, like, being in that moment with them, and them saying, like, all those feelings that you have are normal. Like, all the things. And, you know, and that was another thing of why I wanted to share my story with having a miscarriage, because I also felt like I went through hoops and bounds to research videos that I could relate to, because I felt like there was a lot of people that I couldn't relate to. I didn't really have any friends that experienced that. Like, I would receive, you know, people just saying it's gonna be okay, but I didn't really feel like I had anybody who understood what I was going through or the feelings that I had. And just being able to find a couple of vloggers on YouTube that went through something similar or even worse, it just really helped me to validate the feelings that I had. So that same year, of 2020, which was like the worst year ever.
Right.
And my son being born.
What is this virus going on?
Exactly. It was horrible. But I just remember Josiah being born on December 30th of 2020. And I remember correlating that date with December 30th of 2019 when I was leaving the doctor's office for my last checkup appointment, and her telling me in regards to not having sex for, this, that, and third, but it just being like the finalization of that situation. Right. And I was like, wow, like this was God's plan all along. Like he wanted me maybe to be more settled, maybe to be more financially prepared, maybe going through that to share with other people, to appreciate being a mom, because sometimes that's something that we can take for granted. Like I just remember saying, I'm going to have a baby when I'm 23, or I'm going to have a baby when I'm this age. And so many people
thinking that you control
that. And it's just like you learn to not take being able to have a child and being able to carry that child, you being healthy and providing that healthy space for that child throughout your whole pregnancy. You don't take it for granted anymore. And I think that that's what I really needed personally, just to be able to appreciate my son the way I do. Not to say that I wouldn't have appreciated him if I didn't go through that, but like just really like some of the stuff that like other people may get frustrated at. Like I just, I get frustrated because I'm human, but just really being able to sit back and say, wow, like regardless of what's going on around me, you're my blessing. Exactly. And it's just, God is very intentional. So I just definitely,
that's such like a miracle.
It is, yeah.
Story. I don't even think when I was reading your story, I don't even think I correlated or noticed that December of 2019 to December 2020, like that just makes it so much more special, like his blessing. I don't know. I mean, I hate saying like everything happens for a reason. God has a reason when tragedy happens. Even though a lot of times like that is our way of bringing ourselves out, of the traumatic situation and just trying to get our mind wrapped around, the whys, right? Because anytime something bad happens, you're like, why is this happening to me? Why, what did I do to deserve X, Y, and Z? Right. But I think like really my intent behind this, this particular episode was for you to share and for also there to be an opportunity for a relation between other mothers that have gone through or aspiring mothers that have gone through and have not conceived yet, like you said, that's what you were looking for other women that you could relate to, because oftentimes, it's a lot of, oh, you're going to be okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. And, how can I help you get through this? But a lot of times we just really want to be able to talk to someone who has gone through it. And even though I personally haven't gone through it, I just think that it's such an important part of motherhood and really just womanhood that we should talk about. I mean, there's a lot of things health-wise that we don't come together and discuss, and just creating that supportive space. Like ultimately, that's what this Boss Mom movement is, beyond the podcast, but in particular, this story. And so I think Josiah's just as cute as he can be.
Thank you.
And that is just so amazing. And you answered it just like your emotions. And I like how you said, you were really addressing how you felt and really being transparent and honest, about how you felt about the entire situation. And I think that's important as well. And not like being unapologetically you in that moment. I mean, it's okay to have those questions. And I know like I hate questioning God too and why things happen, but I feel like that's also human nature, and it's okay to do that because you do want to know like why. But then you may get your why later, like how you said, maybe he just wanted you to be more prepared in certain areas where you maybe weren't so prepared. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I guess I'm wondering, so when you did find out that you were pregnant with Josiah in May, how were you still like dealing with those emotions of the first situation? I know you said like you would see other moms was there anything that you did to maybe like cope with the situation, or anything to that nature?
I just remember meeting a lot of moms at the hospital, just going to doctor's appointments.
Mm-hmm.
Not every mom I was able to like have long conversations with, but a lot of moms that were like a further ahead of me, just like getting ready to have their baby, and just like kind of finding hope through that. Like, you know, it's hard, it's rough, not necessarily sharing my experience. I think I did share it with one of the moms. We talked for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily sharing my experience every time, but just drawing hope from the fact that they're almost there and I'm going to be there too. Like, so giving myself positive affirmations,
Right.
just really like praying, to be honest. That's really what I did a lot of, was praying, being positive. It was really rough, just being in the midst of a whole pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and it had just started, and being pregnant and feeling all the emotions that I did feel from, you know, the miscarriage. It was a lot. So I think music really helped me get through like that dark place. So I listened to a lot of music.
Music is really a therapy though. Like,
yeah, it is.
I use music for everything. I used to use music during breakups.
Everything. Yes. Yeah. And Josiah loves music. So, and I know it's because I listen to music all the time. And that's really just kind of what helped me stay positive.
Mm-hmm.
So just really just being positive, drawing hope from other moms that had just had babies, moms that have kids already, you know, just being friendly and hearing different moms with their experiences and stuff. Just really drawing hope from like that situation of knowing like they made it and I can make it too. So
Absolutely.
that's really kind of how I dealt with the emotions. And just knowing, I think that I learned to put how I felt aside, and kind of not necessarily moping in my sorrows, but, you know, allowing myself to have that opportunity to heal. And, you know, like I said earlier, you know, understanding that I have all the right to feel the way that I do, you know, regardless of what someone else may think or say, or, oh, you being negative. No, like, this was my situation, you know what I'm saying? So owning my situation, owning that I'm entitled to how I feel, because that was something that was traumatizing. I remember one of my line sisters really, and she's also Josiah's godmother, but I remember her really, really, really like, and she had never been through a situation before, but she's already like an inspirational person, and just sending me inspirational things, just talking to me really about just not even just staying positive, but validating it's okay to feel the way that you feel, but you have to move forward, you know, like you have to make sure that you're not allowing this to take over your life, because you never know that you could be helping someone else. You just never know like what you moving out of that and growing and healing from that situation can do for other people. And I had to own, you know, put my feelings to the side and own, this is what I went through, but this is not my end all be all, like you said, and really being able to help other people. And I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel, and so I feel like this was also another push for me to go ahead and start my YouTube channel, to really not only necessarily talk about things dealing with motherhood, but just real life stuff, you know, like you just never know.
You never know what people are going through.
Exactly. You never do. And there's, you know, like you said, there's people that will never speak on the things that they went through if they have gone through miscarriage, because they feel like it's not normal. And I'm kind of outspoken. So I just kind of felt like God put me through that situation for to encourage somebody else. And so I just, you know, I moved forward and was like appreciating the blessing that I was getting ready to have, giving myself positive affirmations, but also knowing that I'm going to be able to help other people with what I've gone through. So, and that's just what I'm all about, helping other people, just really being able to give people like a safe place to talk, you know, like being able to give people like what you're doing, like a safe place to really acknowledge, you know, their feelings and help other people. Cause there's so many people that can come across like your podcast, like, you know, you never know. Like, it doesn't have to be, it's like social media is so broad nowadays. So, you know, you just never know who you're helping. So I just really appreciate you even giving me the opportunity to be able to speak on this, just because I feel like it will help someone. So.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you being brave and sharing your story. I know you shared it on social media, and now you're sharing it here. And I'm sure you shared it just in conversation, just, like you said, inspiring and helping the next woman that may be going through or has gone through this. So like I said, that's what I'm here to do, whether it's sharing my own personal story and transparency or allowing another woman to share hers, and hope that we, inspire the next mom that may be listening, or the next woman who may be listening, and really just providing encouragement. So as I again appreciate you and your transparency today. And ladies, if you're listening, if you have is it okay if you share your Instagram with, maybe ladies that want to follow, or, just thank you for sharing your story?
Of course, yeah. It's been the same since I think I was in middle school. But it's at Pretty Kid, PRETTYKID 17. So y'all don't judge me. I'm not vain. I promise I'm not vain. I'm not conceited. This is just something I just never changed. So it's at Pretty Kid 17. So yes, definitely follow me. I post, things. I share a lot of things on my Instagram, like mom blog, repost, stuff like that. And I do, like I said, hope to eventually get into the YouTube channel. So that's definitely something that I also will be talking about my miscarriage story on, just talking about like how to move forward. And like I said, everybody is different. Everybody's story is different, but giving encouragement, like you said, to the next person. This can be your story too, so it's never the end all be all, regardless of if you have that baby naturally, if you adopt, whatever the case may be, it's still beautiful. Yeah, it's so beautiful. So
well, yes, I encourage you to start that YouTube, girl. That's what I had to give myself that push to start this podcast, because I like to talk, but I always get nervous public speaking. I feel like, I'm going to forget what I need to say, but it's all about just being transparent and being open. So the more I do it, the more I get comfortable. So I'm sure you'll be phenomenal with your YouTube, because I'm going to speak it into existence. It's definitely going to happen for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you. Just like I said earlier, just giving us moms that safe place to be able to listen to other people, the posts that you post, the inspirational quotes, things like that, just relatable content, especially being a new mom. Like, you're looking for so many answers, and it's just, sometimes it's hard to find. So yes, I love the podcast. I love the page.
Thank you. And I'm going to use that as encouragement to keep going and not bow out, because, it definitely gets hard sometimes, but this is definitely a newfound passion of mine. So I'm excited to keep the journey with you ladies, and hope that it grows and touches more women around the world. But again, I appreciate you all for tuning in for this episode with the Boss Mom Podcast. And as always, mommy, stay motivated and stay bossy. And I'll see you all next time.
The Boss Mom Movement Podcast can be found on Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Spotify. Make sure you subscribe and tune in every Sunday.